What's going on, everyone? I'm back with another video. I know it's been a while, but we're gonna get back into it, don't you worry. Today is probably one of my favorite videos to make, and one of my favorite, I guess, fantasy football, exercises, mental exercises to, get myself into the thinking mode for 2020, right? We'll talk about my top 12 fantasy football players today, basically my first round for 2020. Now, it's super early, right? It's super early, and I have the right to change my mind, and of course, I'm going to change my mind. We have a lot of off-season moves that will be made. For example, just some, quick ones. If Kareem Hunt leaves Cleveland, gets a starting role, he'll be probably the fringe guy there. Melvin Gordon leaves LA, that opens up Austin Eckler for, conversation, probably not, but, Melvin Gordon could get definitely into the first round, possibly, if he gets on a good system, a good team. He's been a first rounder before. So these are some scenarios that could happen, and there's scenarios all over the NFL that will change. And to kind of speculate right now on what those situations are, it would be kind of pointless because we have no idea. It's not even off season yet. We're still in playoffs. We're not even at the Super Bowl. So, then that's kind of why this list is so early. Like I said, I had the right to change my mind, and I most definitely will. I do think it is good to make this list now because not that you have to think about fantasy football all off season. It's right now, it's January 17th when I'm recording this, so we still have 4 or 5 months basically until July when fantasy football really starts to kick up, really starts to begin. But it's nice to have this list because that's something you can always look back on. You can see where people or where your mind thinks or changes, over the off season, because it's going to change. It's based on, speculation, based on beat reporters, based on, what the fantasy experts say. And, it happens with everyone. There's biases everywhere. You go, well, it's like thinking of like authority, right? Oh, well, Matthew Berry, ESPN. Oh, I don't know. He says James Conner should be a first rounder this year. Maybe I'm not looking at him right. This is a good way to kind of keep yourself grounded and kind of stick with the picks that you think are the best picks and not get, sucked into what other people are thinking or what the hipster cool pick is, So I think it's a good list to make. Now, this intro is already way too long, and I don't want this video to take forever, but, something I want to look at is just how much fantasy football changes from year to year, right? Does it every single year. We had, back when I first started taking fantasy football really seriously, it was probably about 2015, 2016. And the year after my first, actual serious season was the year that Antonio Brown was supposed to be this number 1 overall pick. And he was the surefire because all the running backs were hurt and they were unreliable. You couldn't trust them, right? And, it hasn't been the same since like that. And, the motto changes every year. Then it was... you had the 0 RB year, then you had the 2 RBs and receivers, then you had like last year where there was 1,000 wide receiver threes. You could get anybody. There was the Tyler Boyds, the Calvin Ridleys. Why would I take a receiver early? Why would I take the early guys when I can just take a bunch of running backs because some of them are going to bust, and I can just bank on the late guys. The thing changes every year. There's never consistency. There's never going to be consistency. So that's kind of where I like to take the best players available, regardless of position. But, this year I think is going to be one of the biggest changes we've seen in the past few years in the first rounders. We have a lot of guys leaving. From last summer, we're losing these guys out of the first round. I'm assuming, but I'm pretty confident. This is in full PPR leagues. David Johnson was on average the 6th to 7th pick. No chance he comes back as first rounder. Le'Veon Bell was the 8th pick. Probably not. James Conner was the 9th pick. There's no chance. Julio Jones is probably the one guy that's going to probably stay, or maybe not stay. He'll drop a few spots, but he'll be a friend, on the turn wide receiver. You know what I mean? Going into the second round. Julio was the 10th to 11th pick on average. Odell Beckham was a 10th to 12th pick. And 2 players right on the fringe of being first rounders last year were Todd Gurley and Juju Smith-Schuster, who were going as the 13th and 14th pick. So essentially, we're losing 7 to 14, 7 players, and a whole new generation of players are coming in, like Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, Leonard Fournette has a chance, Aaron Jones has a chance, Derrick Henry probably will get into the first round, led the league in rushing. So a lot of guys coming in, and I just think this kind of goes to show you that you need to take players you trust, regardless of position. I definitely value running backs over receivers, but all those guys, how many of those guys last year were you really confident in, right? Le'Veon Bell's been a first-round pick in fantasy drafts before, and he was terrible. He was probably one of the biggest busts last year. David Johnson hurt, came back, didn't get the playing time. He's finished as a number 1 running back. James Conner had a great season. No Le'Veon Bell behind the Pittsburgh line. What could go wrong? No one expected Big Ben's elbow to break, him to get hurt all the time. Same thing with Juju Smith-Schuster. Came off the great year. No Antonio Brown. Odell Beckham, one of the best players in the NFL. Oh, going to Cleveland, surefire. Baker Mayfield just broke, rookie record for touchdowns. He's going to take another step up. That it looks like an offensive juggernaut there. Freddie Kitchens is there. Odell barely gets 1,000 yards and probably 5 touchdowns, if that. Todd Gurley, on the Rams offense. Sure, he has arthritis in his knee, but it's the best offense. He's going to be fine. Even if he doesn't do what he did 2 years ago, he's still going to get you over 1,000. He's still going to be pretty good in the receiving game, and he kind of wasn't great this year. I mean, a lot of touchdowns saved him, but so what I'm trying to say is, especially coming into this year, it's going to be a dangerous first round. So just, try to take the guys you think are safe. And like I said, plenty of time to think about it and speculate. We got months, so. But enough talking. I guess not enough talking because I will be continuing talking. But let's get into our top 20 or our top 12 players for 2020. Now, my number 1's probably not going to come as much of a surprise. It's going to come more of a surprise to me because I got pretty lucky getting him in drafts. My number 1 is going to be Christian McCaffrey, right? This past year, I was very down on McCaffrey. I thought he was a good player, but I thought he was too small, and I just thought, the touchdowns wouldn't be repeatable, the work share was just too much, he would get hurt, or they would eventually get it back. I thought they would, bring it back in, that would, kind of take away some of those carries, maybe draft somebody, and it never really came. So Christian McCaffrey is my number 1 pick come next summer. Some of the arguments I do hear for Christian McCaffrey are the same ones I was making last year, right? Not being the first pick in general. The fantasy community is worrying about his snap count at his size, right? Over the past 2 seasons, McCaffrey has totaled, over 2,000 snaps and has 729 touches, which is crazy, and I will admit, even though McCaffrey, posted pictures of him looking jacked this past offseason, see above, this still doesn't mean he's a big back, right? Doesn't mean it. He runs like a pure elusive back, and, I do believe he has broken more arm tackles, 100%. He looks stronger, but he's still a small back. The injury bug doesn't quite scare me because we haven't seen him miss any time yet. 3 years, he's played every game. He has been completely healthy, and why would I not trust a guy who has almost 2,500 rushing yards, almost 200, over 200 catches, 1,800 yards, and 32 total touchdowns in the past 2 seasons. Just the 2 seasons, We have been disappointed with Ezekiel Elliott only having 6 rushing touchdowns in 2018, and his 2018 season, this past season, it was good, but it wasn't as spectacular. Not a lot of big games. Saquon Barkley getting hurt and being inconsistent on the Giants' offense. Alvin Kamara getting hurt and not returning to 2018 form. Go with McCaffrey, who's only finished with less than 20 fantasy points in PPR at least twice last season. Now, this is a tough one for me, right? At number 2, I'm going with Ezekiel Elliott. Zeke was one of the most consistent players last season, and I kind of just talked crap on him, saying that he didn't have a great season, but he was consistent throughout. McCaffrey gets the edge because, of course, he's super great, and his passing game ability, his receiving yards is so high. He got 1,000 last year. Zeke didn't cross the 40 threshold once, where McCaffrey got it multiple times. Zeke did get 15 or more points in 13 of his 16 games. So he didn't really, have any duds. Where he struggled was in the passing game. And, he had a breakout in 2018 where he caught 77 passes. That number would regress to just 54, which is still solid, but less than what we had hoped. Elliott has been healthy his entire career and has only missed significant time in 2017 when he was suspended 6 games due, suspension. That doesn't make sense. But I said suspension twice, but we all know the Zeke story. He's a beast. He's running behind a great Dallas line, a pretty good offense. He's going to continue to get the touches. I wouldn't be as worried as some may be with Mike McCarthy becoming the head coach of the Cowboys because sure, right? He didn't run a lot with Aaron Jones, and that was kind of the story for Aaron Jones was why is Jamal Williams getting so much run when Aaron Jones is there? Because Aaron Jones was the superior talent. But look at who his running backs were for Mike McCarthy. So 2016 and 2015, it was Eddie Lacy, definitely out of his prime. R.I.P. to Eddie Lacy being the first overall pick in fantasy drafts a few years back. James Starks and Ty Montgomery. Then 2014 was Eddie Lacy's last, big breakout year where he had 246 carries and 40 catches. 2013, Lacy had 280 carries with 30 catches. That's 300 touches, right? And Zeke's going to get more than that, but it kind of goes to show you when Mike McCarthy had a good back, he ran them. Not when he had a bunch of pretty mediocre backs and split them all up. When he had Eddie Lacy, he had a season where he had 280 touches and a season where he had over 300 touches. So Zeke's a great talent, and I wouldn't be worried about Mike McCarthy because, truthfully, if Mike McCarthy starts to not run Zeke, Jerry Jones is going to have a field day firing him. So I would trust Zeke. Now, my number 3 is going to be Saquon Barkley. Now, Barkley is a very weird player to value coming into 2020. Without looking at the final stats, I felt that Barkley took a major step back this season, but that doesn't seem to be the case at all, really. In his rookie season, Barkley rushed for 1,300 yards, 11 touchdowns, caught 91 passes for over 700, 4 touchdowns, receiving. This breaks down to 81 rushing yards a game, 5.6 catches a game, 45 yards a game. In 2019, Barkley missed 3 games due to what looked to be like a gruesome injury, but luckily got away with just a sprained ankle. In 13 games, Barkley rushed for over 1,000, 6 touchdowns, caught 52 passes for 438 and 2 touchdowns. If you were to take those and average them out for 13 games, that'd be 77 rushing yards a game compared to, 81 per game the year before. His catches went down about a catch and a half to just 4, and the big thing was 33 receiving yards a game, where he was averaging 45 yards a game. Barkley had a great season, but had 2 pretty bad rushing performances with a 13 carry 1 yard game against the Jets and an 8 for 10 performance, where that was the game he left the game after his aforementioned injury. After a drop in catches and receiving yards, it's a major issue. If you take the 4 catches he averaged a game along with the receiving yards, Barkley would have averaged or totaled 64 catches for 539 yards, which is a huge step back from 721. It's 200 yards less. Maybe it's not as major, but in PPR leagues, it matters. So, we know what he is. Saquon Barkley is a generational talent that stuck on a pretty bad team. He had a rookie quarterback who was playing without a majority of his weapons for part of the season. Golden Tate missed 4 games and 2 more due to injury. Sterling Shepard only played 10 games due to concussion issues. Tight end, Evan Ingram only played 8 games this season, battling injuries all year, got put on IR at the end. It's unknown if Joe Judge, will be a drain on Saquon Barkley or not. I tend to think not. And in 2020, go with the surefire talent. Where I differentiate is I want to say, I didn't write this in my notes, this is on the spot. I just think I trust Zeke more in that offense because we have a situation where that offense could be pretty bad. Do we trust? Do we trust? Do we trust Jones? Do we trust the rookie to bounce back in 2020 to take a step forward to make that next leap? I don't know. I don't know if I trust Daniel Jones to do it, but I feel pretty confident that if Dallas stays the same, which I'm sure they will, I don't see why they wouldn't. I think that's why I give, Zeke the nod. I would rather I'd feel more content if I take Zeke and then Barkley rushes for, 2,000 yards, has a huge breakout, because rather than, I draft Barkley and he can't, he's not enough to power through how bad his team is, like the way McCaffrey did this year. I would feel better if, I draft Zeke. So that's why I'm going to go with Ezekiel Elliott this year over Saquon Barkley. It's close. It may change, but I'm going to probably go with Zeke over Barkley for now. I guess I just love going with the controversial picks early in draft. Now, at number 4, I'm going with Nick Chubb. I have a lot of people, I just know it probably listening to this, that have issue with me picking Chubb over players like Dalvin Cook, Michael Thomas, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, etc., etc. Now, I'm a huge fan of Nick Chubb and his play style. He has insane balance, where he gets hit, always getting hit, and staying up, or at least falling forward for extra yard. He's a big back, weighing about, I believe I saw, 227, 230, so he's a thick guy, big back. He has great quickness for his size, and I love his vision. That's his best asset for sure, is his vision. I think his ability to see a cutback lane on an outside zone blocking play is one of the best in the NFL. He reminds me a lot of his teammate of Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt, they're both big dudes that they don't have great open field elusiveness. When he's getting to the safeties, he's not going to basically juke a guy like Saquon Berkeley will or Christian McCaffrey, but that's why they're a little bit higher, right? They do a lot of their damage before the ball crosses the line of scrimmage. Both players are great at finding, running lanes, making linebackers miss, when they're coming up in the hole, or, at not quite the second level where safeties are, but where their linebackers would be. Has a great quickness, short field quickness. And, Chubb broke a lot of big plays. He didn't take it to the house every time because if we're going through, an A through F, speed, I'd probably give him about a BB plus. Not amazing, but still pretty good. We also, I don't know, I feel so safe with Nick Chubb. We've seen him be productive for 2 straight seasons, right? So back in 2018, Chubb didn't get more than 3 carries until week 7 because of Carlos Hyde was there. From week 7 on, he rushed for 823 yards and 6 TDs. Last year, he got the job right away because he's amazing. And he rushed for over 1,400 yards, 8 touchdowns. I think people would be scared of the Kareem Hunt because Kareem Hunt had some good games, right? Kareem Hunt had games where he didn't do a lot in the rushing game. Only rushed for 43 times for under 200 yards in 8 games, but did a lot in the receiving game. Hunt had games of 7 catches, 6 catches, 2 catches, not great, but 5 catches, 8 catches, 4 catches, touchdowns in one got a receiving touchdown last year, 2 rushing touchdowns. So he was on the field, played over 50% snaps in every single game he played. So I like, Kareem Hunt as a player. Big fan. But they didn't use him like he was going to be a big part of their offense. They used him in the passing game because Nick Chubb, although I think he might be underutilized as a receiver, you can tell he's not running routes. He has pretty good hands, He made that one great catch in the left side of the end zone where he jumped over like a linebacker that was underneath him or a corner. It was a great play, but it makes more sense for Kareem Hunt to get those because Kareem Hunt's actually a pretty good pass catcher. I'm assuming Kareem Hunt will actually leave to get a bigger deal from someone else next season because he isn't a backup, right? He's a starter. But if Kareem Hunt stays, what he put up this year, Chubb's numbers weren't that different from when Chubb arrived, or when Hunt arrived after week 8, because he had to miss 8 games due to suspension. So without Hunt, Chubb averaged 19.3 attempts a game, 100 yards per game, and 3.1 catches. With Hunt there, Chubb averaged 18 attempts per game, which is 1.3 less, which is not a big deal. 86.4 yards, which that's 14 less, but getting almost the same amount of carries, I don't think that's a Kareem Hunt problem. I think that's Chubb didn't break the big one against Baltimore problem. And his catches did go down, cutting pretty much in half to 1.4 catches a game. We've seen Chubb be great with a struggling Cleveland offense at times. I believe that if we see another year of the Cleveland struggle bus, Nick Chubb will be just fine, and that's why I'm really confident with taking him at number 4. Am I really this crazy to put Alvin Kamara at my number 5 after his 2019 season? I know everyone is about to click off the video. Now, I had a really tough time, a really tough debate between Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, and Michael Thomas. Of course, Michael Thomas had a great season, but I value RBs higher because there's less of them. Remember what I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the video. We lost a lot of first-rounders that were running backs. David Johnson, James Conner, Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, Joe Mixon had a tough year. Now, I know Dalvin Cook played great this year, but there are a few reasons why I like Kamara over Cook. I think Alvin Kamara is the better talent. Kamara battled injury and played in 14 games. And when he came back from his injury, you can tell they didn't want to force him back into a big workload. That sounds kind of like I'm making stuff up to kind of boost this guy, but I think it was true. He didn't look the same coming off an ankle sprain, which we know an ankle sprain, as basic of an injury as it is, it's a lingering one. And Kamara has the rare combination of everything. And that's everything you want. I think he's one of the best there is with everything. He has pure acceleration, one of the fastest stop and start guys in the NFL easily. Kamara is the player who stops in front of like two players, and he takes off and easily jukes them out. He breaks them down. He does what Christian McCaffrey does really easily. He can catch a pass, defenders rushing him, he takes a step back and takes off right around him. You know, where I think Dalvin Cook differs is Dalvin Cook, you pitch it to him on the outside, you run a zone read to the outside, and Cook doesn't dance. He doesn't do a dance. He cuts and hits the lane hard, and when he hits the lane he wants, he slows down or isn't at his fastest yet, and he hits another gear. And when he hits the next gear, it just makes linebackers and safeties that are coming up, it just makes them take a bad pursuit angle. That's what it is. It's the weirdest thing. It doesn't look like he makes a move because he really doesn't. He just runs faster. And that works. I don't know. And Alvin Kamara is such a good pass catcher. Weirdly enough, he has 81 catches for 3 straight years, which is really weird. And, he's probably only worse than Christian McCaffrey as a pass catcher. I mean, I would say he's number 2. And he has pretty good power for our, not great power, but he has enough to break arm tackles and to push a pile forward if need be. Cook had better numbers than Kamara this year, but I wasn't as impressed with Cook as I was Kamara. Like I said earlier, Cook probably has one of the best acceleration. He has the best 0 to 60, but he needs a lot of space to get going first in order to make his moves. I worry that if the Vikings offensive line gets worse, there's a possibility with, Kevin Stefanski leaving for the Browns, that offensive line could take a step back. With a bad offensive line, I worry Cook would have a hard time finding space because he doesn't have the left-right juke that Kamara has. He has the stop-and-go acceleration, which is great, or not even really stop-and-go. He more has the go. I don't know if he has much of the stop-and-go, but he has the hand-off and go, which is great if you have a running lane to get going. But I worry if he doesn't have that, then he can struggle finding space behind a line that isn't great. I also worry about injury. Dalvin Cook hasn't played a full season yet. He did just come off a 14-game season, which is a step in the right direction. It's good. 14 games. I think you take that, more times than not. But you can't look past the 2 seasons where he played 4 games and 11 games. Kamara has only missed 3 games in 3 years. So I'm going to take probably Kamara. I mean, this could change, like I say. I say this all the time, If we get some mystery news that Drew Brees ends up, retiring, which I doubt, but you never know. I don't know. But I'm going to take Kamara number 5 over Michael Thomas and Dalvin Cook. Next on my list at number 6, I have Michael Thomas. This one will be short and sweet. You don't break the NFL receiving record by luck. Michael Thomas is a great route runner who doesn't have the burner speed or really the elite quickness. Similar to DeAndre Hopkins in play style, they both really aren't the quickest or the fastest, but they both play really big and they have a ton of power and strength to get off. You can't press them, and if you sag off, they're going to beat you. And of course, Michael Thomas having Drew Brees is a blessing. Now, the one thing with Michael Thomas is you don't get a ton of the downfield plays. That's why, of course, he had a ton of yards, but he did have 140 plus catches. But when you average over 9 catches a game and 107 yards a game, I think what he's doing is just fine. Like I said, short and sweet. If you were in the first 1 through 6 and you look at Michael Thomas as as someone who has his locked in points, and if you bypassed all the other running backs and went with Michael Thomas, I couldn't blame you. I don't think I would do that. But I think it's going to become a common thing where I think the wide receivers are going to start to, like Michael Thomas. We had Michael Thomas ball out last year, and then we had a lot of pretty good receivers, but there were some inconsistent ones. You had Hopkins take a kind of a step back. Not that I don't think he got any worse. I just think it was an off year. Tyreek Hill had a step back. Devontae Adams got hurt. So did Tyreek Hill. Michael Thomas got hurt, but he was doing really well. Chris Godwin had a pretty good year. Julio, didn't have the touchdown. So Michael Thomas really stood out above everyone else. So, I think that he's going to be taken pretty highly in drafts. I always, like I said earlier in the video, I value running backs over receivers, but if you went with Michael Thomas, earlier in the draft, or I definitely probably wouldn't take him 1 or 2, but after that, I think you have a case to be made with Michael Thomas there. And to be honest, I can't blame you. Next on my list, I have breakout running back Dalvin Cook. Cook had a great 2019, rushing for over 1,100 yards and 13 touchdowns with 53 catches for over 500 yards. Now, like I mentioned earlier with Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook is the fastest accelerator from handoff in the game. In open space, I worry he doesn't have enough shiftiness, enough wiggle to make the moves necessary to break the big runs. He did break some big runs, of course, but a lot of it was just getting to the outside. He seems to get to the safeties, but just can't quite get past the last tackle. He gets the 12, but if he could just make that last guy miss, where I think other people like Christian McCaffrey and I think Alvin Kamara can, he can't break that last big run. I also worry about a few things. First, Kevin Stefanski leaving for Cleveland, like I mentioned back in the Alvin Kamara, breakdown. Who knows if without their OC, they will use Cook the same way. They used the rookie Alexander Madison a lot, and he looked pretty good. To be honest, who knows if he's good? It could have just been the offense he was in. So, I can see a world where they pull back his usage for Dalvin Cook, and they, use Alexander Madison, who looked pretty good. Another worry I have with Cook is if the offensive line takes a step back, I think it could lead to major issues for Cook. Remember that Rams offensive line that was one of the best in the NFL in 2018? Todd Gurley rushed for 850 yards and averaged 3.8 yards a carry in 2019. What I'm saying is, nobody's foolproof. No team is repeatable. Anything can happen at any time. So if the Vikings line all of a sudden gets worse, Cook doesn't seem like the player who can make the big play out of nothing. My last issue is injury, of course. Only missing 2 games this last season is great. It's definitely a step in the right direction for Dalvin Cook. With him only missing 2 games is pretty good, but we have to remember, he only played 11 games last season, and 2 seasons ago, he only played 4 his rookie year. I have a feeling Dalvin Cook is going to be one of the players that I'm just not going to buy into this year, because I think, with me having him at 7, I think I'm going to be in the minority. I think that he's going to be one of those top 4 guys when it comes, said and done. I think he's going to be a guy where the fantasy gurus out there, they need to put Dalvin Cook up there because he's so great. Everybody does that every single year where they go, well, Dalvin Cook, he blew up this year. He has to be better next year. He has to. Everyone gets better. They has to get better. He has to be better than what he was this year. And I just don't think it's going to happen. I think this year was the best case scenario. I think he and Derrick Henry both kind of hit their peaks this year, and those are 2 players I'm probably not going to buy into this year. I think they're going to end up being top 4 picks, but talk about being out of the norm. I think number 7 is going to be pretty low on the general consensus list for this year, and I have him at number 7, and I think he's going to stay there. Now at number 8, this is where the receivers start to come off the board for me. I had issues ranking DeAndre Hopkins, Tyreek Hill, and Devontae Adams. I decided to go with DeAndre Hopkins because we all know Hopkins is one of, if not the best receiver in the NFL. His track record shows he has put up great consistent numbers, and although you did have a stretch early in the year where spending your first round pick on him didn't seem worth it, from weeks 2 to 6 this past season, Hopkins only had 1 week where he finished with more than 16 points in that stretch, which means in PPR leagues from weeks 2 to 6, he finished outside of the top 24 at receiver for each individual week 3 times and outside the top 12 every week. So he really didn't live up to his value for week 1 he balled out, but weeks 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 he really wasn't good. That can hurt you early in a season, but on the whole, Hopkins finished as a receiver, or number 1 receiver, ranked 1 through 12 in weeks 1, 7, 8, 9, 12, 14. So that's 6 weeks of him being a top 12 receiver after starting off the season pretty poorly, and that's pretty good. Hopkins did play well this year, but like I mentioned, and of course, it was inconsistent early on, which could have kept you from winning games early in the season. D-Hop did help win you some big games after week 6 with scores of 21, 25, 26, and 27 with the following weeks. You know what you have with Hopkins, an elite receiver with a great QB. I expect his TDs to go up, as I don't expect Darren Fells to catch 7 touchdowns again when his career high was 3. Going with Hopkins at number 8 and as the number 2 receiver off the board in 2020 is a pretty safe plan. If you decided to go with maybe Tyreek Hill over him or a Davante Adams, I can't really knock you for that. Or if you wanted to put him in number one, he has the track record. I think it'd be foolish, but DeAndre Hopkins is a great player and a pretty safe bet for 2020. At number 9, I'm going with Tyreek Hill. If you made a list of players that I'm in love with, Tyreek Hill would be at top of that list. Hill is easily the fastest player in the NFL with the quick acceleration. He is the ultimate game changer playmaker. He has the rare combination at just 5'10", 185 of great ball skills in the air and winning jump balls. I'll include some clips of those so you see it, but Hill is just so special. He's not like other players. He's the rare, only breed of his kind. He can just run past everyone. He's different than like Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson just had the speed. Hill has the stop and go, the breakdown. He can do it all. I love Tyreek Hill. Hill missed some games last year with a broken collarbone, but that kept him out 4 games. He also left his Week 11 game after only playing 7 snaps, so that game was a goose egg. Pat Mahomes also missed 2 games, but in those games I will, give Tyreek Hill credit. Finished with over 200 yards and a touchdown, in both games combined. So there's not much to say about Tyreek Hill. Last year he was more of a boom and bust kind of player than he has been in the past. In 12 games, technically 11 if you don't count that one game where he just played 7 snaps, but we'll include it. Hill finished as a wide receiver 1 4 times. In those 4 games, he finished with 25, 26, 33, and almost basically 24 points. If you were to average out Tyreek Hill total for the 12 games and make that over 16 like he played a whole season, he would have finished the year with 77 catches for a little bit over 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns roughly. You can't really guess touchdowns, but 9 touchdowns if you averaged it out. And that's even including the stinker in Week 11, so those stats would even go up without that. I think Tyreek Hill is the most explosive playmaker in the entire NFL. Last year was riddled with injury, and I think next year he's going to be ready to show what a true playmaker he is. Also, I mentioned earlier, with my Alvin Kamara speech, if you want to see my breakdown on Tyreek Hill, he was in my 2019 My Guys video that I posted, or it will be posted down below in the description if you want to see me break down more Tyreek Hill's film and why I love him so much. But he may not be the most consistent player, with just 4 weeks being a receiver 1 in week 6, 9, 10, and 15. Of course, only played 12 games. Technically, I guess 11 because he did get hurt in the one game, but he played him that week. But he has that ability to literally take a handoff and take it 100 yards, or catch a screen and take it 100 yards, anything. He has that ability, and that's why I love him so much. He saves you weeks. At number 10, I have Davante Adams. Now, Davante Adams is such a weird player for me. I still remember the days when he was considered to be a bad receiver back in his first 2 years in the NFL. And then in 2016, he had his breakout with almost 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. But I was skeptical because of his low yardage and how high the touchdowns were that year. And at the time, Jordy Nelson was still on the team. And Jordy Nelson was obviously on his way out of the NFL, but I still had hope that he was going to be good and would take away from Adams. But I was completely I was wrong to doubt the skills of Davante Adams. I think this past year was an outlier year for Adams for 2 reasons. The first being he missed 4 games. In his career prior, he only missed 6 games in 4 years, which isn't great. 6 games in 4 years is over a season, but I'll take that. That's not too bad. It's not like he's ever had really the torn ACL or anything, so I'll take it. The second reason is that he only had 5 touchdowns. To be fair, he only played 12 games, and it's Aaron Rodgers, so who knows where he would have ended up if he played all 16. But since 2016, Adams has had 10 or more touchdowns since 2016. So 3 full seasons of 10-plus touchdowns is pretty reliable. What changed for the Packers is Aaron Jones getting 16 rushing touchdowns and 3 receiving, with Jamal Williams rushing for a touchdown and catching 5 as well. That's 25 touchdowns just coming from your running backs. Davante Adams still is one of the best route runners in the NFL, with great ball skills downfield, and in 1v1 situations, you're not going to be able to man him up. If you take Adams' stats and average them out over 16 games like I did for Tyreek Hill, he would have had, finished with over 110 receptions for over 1,300 yards and around 6 to 7 touchdowns. Adams is great, and having Aaron Rodgers is nothing to complain about. Adams did play very well this year, and for fantasy points sake, He finished as a top 12 receiver in weeks 4. Week 10, he finished 13th by 0.1, so I'll count that. So week 10. Week 12, finished 13th by 0.3, so I'll count that as near 2. So weeks 4, week 10, week 12, week 13, 15, 16, 17. He only played 12 games. He finished as a top 12 receiver, like weekly, at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games out of his 12. That's just really good stats. That's a lot of touchdowns and big numbers, and you can't really go wrong with that. You know, I for some reason he still makes me a little uneasy, but you can't doubt the production. Just looking at his game logs, during the regular season, he had 5 games over 100 yards receiving, and then had 2 more in the playoffs with 160 yards and 2 touchdowns against Seattle, and 9 catches for 138 against San Francisco. If you took Adams over any of the receivers I put above him, I really couldn't argue it, except for probably Michael Thomas. The reason I just have Tyreek Hill probably above him and Hopkins is I think Tyreek Hill is amazing. I love him as a player, and I like Davante Adams. I don't want to get that twisted, but I think Tyreek Hill is just so special. And Hopkins, I mean, he's had the longevity of being safe. We've had Davante Adams not get 1,000 yards for a few seasons, so it's been a lot of touchdowns and not a lot of yardage. You know, I think I feel safer with Hopkins. But I like Davante Adams as a player, and I can't argue it if you have someone above him. At number 11, I have Josh Jacobs. Another year, another hopeful Oakland Raiders running back. We've been through Latavius Murray, Marshawn Lynch's return, Doug Martin, and now we have Josh Jacobs. Jacobs is coming off a year of which he put up over 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns in just 13 games. Jacobs was a sneaky player this year, I think, in most leagues, and I think that's because of the lack of huge games with around 3 or 4 big weeks. Yeah, I'm starting to like Jacobs as a player after seeing the film. He's not the fastest player. He'll get chased down, but he has great acceleration. He breaks arm tackles pretty easily. I love his vision. He finds cutback lanes better than almost anybody in the entire NFL, and he makes good moves at the second level, which shocks me with him being, 220 pounds. Although he didn't do much as a pass catcher, only catching 20 passes this season, if they decided to up his volume, I think he would be a great weapon out of the backfield. They do have Jalen Richard and DeAndre Washington, who, why do you split that up? That makes no sense to me. They each had 36 catches, which is weird, but they each had 36. And I don't get that, because I think Josh Jacobs is great. But he looks no different to me than Ezekiel Elliott as a receiver. If Zeke can do, 50 to 60 catches, why can't Jacobs? One positive is that the Raiders gave Jacobs the rock from the start of the season, which is rare in a rookie running back. Sometimes they'll break in that rookie and run a veteran, or as I like to call it, Frank Gore syndrome. But that didn't happen to Jacobs. He had 6 games over 20 carries and 10 games over 15 carries in 2019. If you average out his carries over 16 games, he would have finished with 297, which would have been 4th best in the NFL behind Nick Chubb, Ezekiel Elliott, and Derrick Henry. Which also doesn't say much because Henry finished with 303 carries. Jacobs could have led the NFL in carries if he played all 16 games. I guess I shouldn't say doesn't say much. I think it says a lot, actually. He could have been number 1 in carries in the entire NFL. Where Jacobs can get scary is when Oakland is losing. In games where Oakland ended up losing by 14 more points, his playing time was limited. He played 70% of the team's snaps in week 1 and didn't hit the mark again this season. Going off the script here too, I'm just looking at games where they lost by 14 points. In week 2, they lost by 18 points against Kansas City. He ran the ball 12 times, didn't get a catch, no touchdown. So that week wasn't great. Only played 48% of the snaps. Next week, got 10 carries for 44 yards. They lost by 20. He played 42%. Against Green Bay, he played 56% and had a pretty good game, but they lost by 20 points. Against Houston, he lost by 3. He played 55. Against the Jets, this is bad too. 10 carries for 34 yards. They lost by 30 points to the Jets. He only played 40%, 23 snaps on offense. That's scary. That can lead to dangerous. That can lead to a dangerous outcome for your weekly upside potential. And I'm not helping my argument here because I'm the one who's trying to advocate him as a first round pick, but in weeks where Oakland was competitive or won the game, the man got the rock. I mean, in week 1 against Denver, it's 23 carries, 2 touchdowns, had a catch. In week 4, 17 carries for 79, 2 catches. In week 5 against Chicago, they won by 3 points. He had 26 carries, 2 touchdowns. They lost to Green Bay that 1 week, but he did have 21 carries. Lost to Houston, had 15 carries, which isn't great, but it's not bad either. Against Detroit, they won by a touchdown, 28 carries, 2 catches. Actually, 0 catches, but 2 targets, but 28 carries. Against the Chargers, 16 carries, 3 catches. Another game against Chicago, they won by 7, 23 carries, 3 catches. So, he had big weeks when, the team was up and winning. And that, of course, that's a lot for, that happens with a lot of running backs. But there was also games too where they did lose or were losing by a lot and he played a good amount. Maybe he didn't have a ton of snaps, but he had a lot of touches. I mentioned the bad weeks, but at week 13 against Kansas City, he had 17 carries. I don't think you're going to really argue about your running back getting 17 carries. And week 15, the last game he played against Jacksonville, he didn't have great statistics, but I mean, he had 24 carries. So it's not like he just gets completely game planned out of the game. He only had 2 games or 3 games under 15 carries this year. So the workload seems pretty safe week by week. Jacobs is the go-to guy. Probably not in the passing game for Oakland, and that could always change. But as of right now, it's not looking good. But he's the go-to guy on the ground. He's going to get the goal line touches. I like Jacobs a lot as a player, and I think he will be outside the first round for most people or most people's list coming into the summer. Like I mentioned, it's January, so we still have months and months until pretty much May, June, July, until fantasy football starts to ramp up. So, right now I think Jacobs is looking like he's going to be outside the first round. So, hey, look for Jacobs in your first round. He's going to be one of those flop guys where he's going to be on the 12 to 13 pick turn this summer, and I think that's a good place for him. I got him in my first round, but I love Josh Jacobs, and I'm excited to see where he his future lays. And last but not least, number 12 on my list is going to be Todd Gurley. Now, I'm officially crazy. I'm putting Todd Gurley on this list over a handful of guys who probably should be over him, aka Derrick Henry. Man, do I love Todd Gurley as a player. Things went bad for Gurley and the Rams this year. They went from the Super Bowl to not making the playoffs. Gurley went from 1,200 yards and 17 touchdowns to just over 800 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns on the ground, 59 catches to just 31. I worry the fantasy football analysts and the community will go out there and say Todd Gurley is no longer good at football anymore. And if they say that, you probably shouldn't be listening to that podcast anymore or that media outlet. The problem for the Rams is the fact that their offensive line got significantly worse so fast. Gurley is both great at running up the gut and on zone read plays. And those lanes really weren't there for him in 2019 like they were in 2018. I think Gurley's situation was overplayed with him getting less touches because of his knee. Sure, his carries and touches did go down. We're going to look at it. I think there was some situations that hindered his ability to get carries. Gurley had 14 or more carries 10 times this year. In the weeks he got less than 14 carries, we're going to look. Let's look at each game. So, the first game, in week 4, the Rams got down very quickly to the Buccaneers and lost the game 55-40. You think they had time to run the ball when they're down 55-40? That's the final score, almost 100 points. Jared Goff threw the ball 68 times. He almost threw the ball 70 times. That has to be an NFL record. 68 times. In week 8, the Rams won against the Bengals 24-10. Even then, Goff threw the ball just 31 times, which is low for him on average. This may sound like an excuse, but I think this is a valid reason. I think that's a game where the Rams go in and say, you know what, we're going to probably beat the Bengals. We're up 24-10. I'm not sure if Andy Dalton was playing at that time or not, but I think they had Ryan Finley in at the time. And, why play Gurley a ton when there's no need to? That might be an excuse, but I think it's a legit reason. Week 10, the Rams lost to Pittsburgh 17-12. Pittsburgh defense is pretty good. It's pretty great, actually. And I think this is just a loss for Gurley this week. Not excusable. I think that's just a week where they just didn't have anything going. Week 12, the Rams lost 45-6 against the Ravens. So running was out of the question. Week 15, the Rams lost to Dallas by 23 points. Jared Goff threw the ball 51 times. Gurley still scored a touchdown on the ground and through the air, so he had a good fantasy game, but didn't do a lot, in yardage-wise. So can you tell me they just refused to give him the ball? I don't think that's the case at all. I think the Rams were put in some bad situations and were forced to throw the ball a ton. In 2020, the Rams have to take off the training wheels, off Gurley, and let him become a bigger factor. There's no reason he shouldn't be getting more catches, especially if Goff is going to throw the ball on average 39 times a game. And he tied Jameis Winston for first in passing attempts with 630. I think Gurley is still a great player he once was. He scored 14 touchdowns this year, 12 on the ground, which is awesome because he's an animal in the red zone. He can run through the middle, beat you up, run down your throats, or he'll freeze the outside defender on a toss or stretch play and beat him to the pylon. I really do think if the Rams can fix their offensive line, because what's Sean McVay known for? He's the offensive guru. And they don't want to make Jared Goff throw the ball 68 times. They don't want that. They want to give Todd Gurley the ball. And none of the backups seemed very competent either in their when they came in for Gurley. I guess the one positive is there wasn't early on in the season. They ran they seemed like they ran the backups a lot. And I think Gurley's output started to definitely increase. So from weeks 1 through 4, he played 70% of the snaps, 63, 73, 75, which is still good numbers, right? But then week 5, 93, then 61, 53. But then from 12 on, he played 96, 68, 79, 96, 77, 68. And it kind of varied throughout the year, but it seemed like it got more consistent towards the end of the year of him playing more snaps. And like I was saying, if the Rams can find a way to fix their offensive line, there's no reason why Gurley can't be a top 10 fantasy running back next season. And honestly, there's no reason why he can't be a top 5 running back next season if the offensive line gets back to the way it was in 2018 rather. Let's hope, because Todd Gurley's a great player. And that's it. Remember when I said I didn't want this video to be too long? 40 minutes later, I just wanted to make this list to just get it out there and for you guys to get a conversation going. Not with me necessarily, even though, hey, I welcome that, but with yourselves. It's never too early to really get a starting list going. Like I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, you need to know a baseline of where you believe the players are going to go. And that will, help you to stay kind of to your roots and not get twisted by what the headlines say and what all the stupid reports are going to say coming this summer. There's going to be a lot of varying top 12 lists this year from fantasy analysts because, I had many honorable mentions for this list, like Melvin Gordon, Chris Carson, Julio, Mike Evans, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, and honestly, there are more guys you can consider for this list. Leonard Fournette had a really good year too. I want to hear from you guys. Who did you like on my list and who didn't you like? And share your list with me. I'm always willing and encouraging to have a conversation in the comments or, tweet me at EvankTheTank. That's at EVANKTHETANK. I'll put it in the link below. But I always, encourage that stuff. And I plan on coming out with a Joe Burrow scouting video sometime in the near future. And I may possibly do a quick Super Bowl video, but the Joe Burrow video will for sure be coming, a nice scouting video. I want to thank you guys for watching. I really, really do appreciate it. Give this video a like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.